So welcome everyone to the ASA Early Career Research Chapters for this virtual series, which we're doing on managing our careers during the pandemic. So this meeting today will be recorded for future viewing on YouTube, so just remember that. And so I will be moderating today's session along with Nicole Berry. If I can move to my next slide, here we go. Sorry. So I'd like to start off with an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, the ASA ECR chapter acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. And we pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. And this meeting is covered under the Code of Conduct, which I will refer everyone to the URL link at the bottom. But the ASA is committed to making all ASA organized, sponsored, or supported meetings, events, and publications inclusive, productive, and enjoyable for everyone, regardless of their age, caring responsibilities, cultural diversity, disability, indigeneity, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical appearance, or religion. And today is part 4 of our series, which we're going to be focusing on career pathways or jobs in academia, both the good and the bad. And we have a really good panel set up, which includes Cathryn Foster, Richard McDermid, Kim V. Tran, and Cathryn Trott. And at any time today, I will encourage you to ask questions in the chat box. And if the question is a comment or something specifically for one of the panel members, make sure you make a note of that so we know who it should be addressed to and everything. And so before we start, I would like to start off with a really bad joke, because I love telling really bad jokes. And did you know that stressed is just desserts spelled backwards? So when you're eating desserts, just think of it as you're literally eating your stress away. So that's my bad joke of the day. And also my bad advice of the day. So I'm pretty positive that the academic career advice we're going to be receiving from today's panels will hopefully be immensely better. And so I will start off with, we're going to start off with introductions of all of our panel members. And they're going to tell us, so you can tell us your name, where you're located at, and if there's something you want to add about, your career path in the academy, you can feel free to say that now. And we'll start off with Carol.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Caroline Foster. I'm an Astro 3D Fellow at the University of Sydney. I'm also...
Did you guys hear me? Because I think my input just changed. Okay, cool. I'm also the ESO European Southern Observatory Users Committee representative for Australia, so you might have seen emails coming through your inbox. I'm one of the PIs for the MAGPIE large program, which is an ESO large program with lots of people in Australia, members of the team. This is my 3rd postdoc, so I'm not on a faculty position at the moment. I've worked at 2 observatories where I had 50% of my time for duties, so support duties, and now I've been enjoying a research-only fellowship the past couple of years. I am on the market for a faculty position, and I have been attending these Zoom meetings as an attendee as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I'm going to learn a lot today, as well as everyone else. I'm a mother of a 5-year-old, and I did take time off after having her for about 11 months on maternity leave. My daughter has now started school, so just a few months ago, I went back to full-time, so I'm still adjusting to that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Richard?
Hi everyone, so I'm Richard. I'm currently Associate Professor at Macquarie University. So I guess career background, I had, after PhD, I had a 5-year postdoc at the University of Leiden. And I then went to take up a astronomer position at a Gemini Observatory in Hawaii, which was kind of 40% research type post that evolved into something like a staff astronomer post with 20% research. And so in total, I spent 6 years at Gemini in this kind of mixed role. Then I came to Australia in 2013 in again, a joint position. So it was half academic and half working at the AO. together with Caro actually at that time, doing support work for international telescope usage from Australian researchers. And then 3 years after coming here, I got a future fellowship, which recently ended, and I'm still adjusting. And now a faculty position at Macquarie doing kind of teaching academic role, 40-40 and 20% for admin.
Excellent. Kath?
Hi, I'm Cathryn Trott. I'm an associate professor at ECR Curtin University in Perth. My career path is, I finished my PhD at the University of Melbourne in 2005, working on the structure of galaxies and gravitational lensing. I then left astronomy to work as a management consultant for a couple of years with McKinsey, just for something different. And then I moved to Boston because my partner got a job in Boston, and I did 3 years as a medical imaging physics postdoc in a hospital, which really applied my astronomy skills, imaging skills to a different field, but nonetheless was outside of astronomy. I then had a child and had 2 years off from work, caring for her. We moved to Perth again for my partner's job. And then I picked up a radio astronomy postdoc position very fortuitously after some discussions with Stephen Tingay here at Curtin in 2011. I've been here ever since, firstly as a level A postdoc, and then working up through a DECRA and now a future fellowship. And I now have a continuing position here. So I'm also part of Astro 3D, and I lead, co-lead with Rachel Webster, the NWA Epoch of Reionization project.
Excellent. V? I think you're muted.
Yes. Hi, so my name is Tran. I am on the faculty at University of New South Wales in the School of Physics. I did my graduate studies at UC Santa Cruz, and then I moved with my husband to Switzerland where we had postdoc positions, and then I kind of ping-ponged around a little bit. I don't know, Richard, if we overlapped in Leiden. I was there for a little while, vaguely remember. And then Boston, and then oh yeah, and then I went to Texas A&M. My husband and I he's actually a theoretical physicist, and we were able to get continuing known as tenured track positions at Texas A&M. And we took those positions, and then we decided that Texas really wasn't a really great place for us. So we were looking to move onwards, and I landed in Sydney simply because I had, well, first of all, it's awesome, but also I've been collaborating with lots and lots of Australians, basically starting in around 2006, 2007, and I had long, strong collaborations already. And it was just a really great opportunity to build on that foundation. And I'm now also part of Astro 3D. I chair, many of you may have gotten a number of emails from me randomly. I chair the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. I also currently lead the Galaxy Evolution Project. I also have G-rated jokes if there's time at the end.
Excellent. Well, I personally want to hear these later. Okay, but we will jump straight into questions. As I said earlier, we have some preset questions that we'll go over, but anytime you have a question you'd like to ask, just feel free to put it in the chat, and we're going to do our best to answer all questions from the audience. So we're going to start off with a question to Richard, and it's, if you could go back in time to when you were a student or you're a postdoc, you can pick any time you want, and you could give yourself one piece of advice that you wish you really knew that could have been useful now, what would that be?
So yeah, don't take advice with the obvious one. Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I sort of framed it in terms of if I knew then what I know now kind of thing. And I think I wish I'd known the importance of, you know, that perfection's really the enemy of good enough, and being able to identify what's good enough is a very important skill. And it's better to get things kind of finished at a good level rather than pushing too hard to reach some kind of unattainable level of quality that you think is there, but actually just holds you back from progressing. And I think that's something that took me some time to figure out as a researcher where that line is. And I think I'd probably go back and tell myself to pay more attention to figuring out what's good enough, basically.
That's really good. I have heard similar advice to that. Does anyone else in the panel want to add to this? Besides the echoing nods of agreement. All right.
I still haven't figured it out, if that's any consolation.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little better then.
Happy to add to that. I think I still struggle with this, but I think I've come to realize that we are our best advocate. Like it's, applying for prizes, you have to do that yourself. Don't count on someone else nominating you. Even fighting for your ideas. There will always be people that are critical, but it's our job to defend our ideas and defend our choices. I think we're prized in academia for being innovative thinkers, if you like, but often those who think outside the box can be strongly criticized. And so that's why I think it's really important if you can take a step back and have a look at your ideas and be like, I still think that's a good idea, to really fight for it and defend it. I think we're our own best advocates.
That's a good comment too. Okay, let's see, we'll direct this one to V. So a lot of times in academia, we are graded on, our outputs, our research output, how many papers do you publish, how many conferences have you been to, how many things do you organize, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you maintain productivity when you feel burnt out, especially if you feel like you have the option that you just can't take a break?
So I think it's probably a little anticlimactic. My general advice would be, if you're feeling burnt out and stretched, to take a break. I mean, it's you're no good to anyone, least of all yourself. And it was something I learned, strangely enough, when I was in the midst of, I was starting to write lots and lots of proposals. I think as a postdoc, that's kind of, the next step if you're an observer. And I made, I made a lot of time focusing on these proposals, and I would kind of get, in this circular spirally space, which was not very productive. And it took me a while to just basically, fortunately, so the other bit of advice is do something else, have something other than this, because it makes you appreciate and enjoy this much more if you have something else. And that's just advice I give to all of my team members and people who I, have the honor of mentoring and stuff. So for me, because I've danced since I was very young, and that forces a structure. If you're going to go to class, you have to go to class. So what I would do is, even if I was in the middle of a proposal, I would go to class, and it would force me to take time away. And your subconscious actually processes a lot of that, and taking a step away from something really makes you kind of just take a breath, because when you're in the middle of it, you just can't, it's really hard to break that cycle. So I think you could use that just broadly, not just for writing proposals, but if you're in a spot with how things are at work. I had, my first postdoc was actually very, very difficult. I learned a lot. That's code for building lots of character. I got through it. It made me realize all the things that I did and didn't want to be as a professional astronomer, as just a mentor or manager or whatever. But yeah, so just to kind of get back, my very long response to the short answer is just, even if you do have the choice, you always have the choice. You always have a choice to take time off. You always have a choice to take self-care. And in the end, it's actually going to be better, because it'll make you a better scientist. It'll make you a happier person. It'll make you a better friend, just in general. And if you're in that, it doesn't help. my analogy is basically like if you were training to do a marathon, not that I would, I think maybe Kath does. I don't know, I think other people here have a very, very good running, or, you know, I know Shinjin does anyway. But if you were, you know, if you were really training for an event, say like a marathon or whatever, and you're, you know, your times weren't good, or they kept getting worse. I have no idea, I'm just making a very poor analogy. I don't think any coach would say, oh, I think you should continue running. I think you should run more. I think you should run for at least another hour, right? I think that a good coach presumably would say, that's enough for today. You know, get some rest, take time off, recover physically, mentally, whatever, come back, and then really refocus on that. So that's, for me, that's the analogy, is like, it's the same with science and whatever it is you're doing. We're doing really high intensity stuff. I mean, the focus that we need, the motivation, the time, it's, although it's very cerebral, it's extremely high intensity. And so in that sense, you really, if you're feeling like you're burning out, or that you don't have that space, or you're not working at your full capacity, just step back, because you're not going to do yourself or anyone else any good.
No, I think that's some really good advice. Any other comments on that from the panel?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one from the perspective. I mean, I think if you're burnt out, absolutely, you know, taking the break is totally crucial. But there's kind of a lead up to that point, I think, which is, you know, can be longer, and you can identify earlier when you're just kind of feeling like overwhelmed, or despondent, or trapped, or, you know, these kind of negative things build up over time. And you know, it can be useful to sort of empower yourself if you can. So identify, you know, what is the issue here? Is it because I'm not happy at work? It's because the job is ending and I don't know what's coming up next. And if you can identify those things and then be proactive about it, and sort of have a target beyond this big hurdle that's coming. If you have a target beyond then, I think that's a strong motivator, like picking up this nice analogy on the marathon. I'm sure there's a point, for me it would be after like 30 seconds, but, you know, if you're in a long race, how do I get to the end of this? And there'll be times when you just want to give up and you feel overwhelmed, but there's something that gets you across the finishing line. I think in life, if you have a hopeful view of the future, I think that's a really important motivator. It lets you'll be amazed what you can cope with and get through, if you know that there's some kind of positive target at the end, and that you're being proactive towards that goal. But yeah, I think if you're burnt out and you're kind of looking in a way for somebody else or something external to solve that issue, that's definitely time to take a break. You know, seek solace from friends, loved ones. You know, get that support that you need to rebuild your energy, so you can get back into that proactive mode and tackle the challenges more positively.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so a lot of us in the audience are, you know, because this is the ECR chapter, you know, students or postdocs, you know, we're starting to transition from, you know, being students to having students. So Kath, my next question for you is, you know, how do you handle difficult conversations with students of yours who are not necessarily achieving the milestones that are necessary for graduation?
So this is a really hard question, first up, I have to say, but I don't think there's any easy questions. That's a really tough one, and having to have difficult conversations would probably be the hardest part of my job. And I don't think that anyone ever does it perfectly. I think it's one of those things that you build up experience over time to learn how to best be a manager and how you can effectively help people. But when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking back to the very, thankfully, few occasions where I've had to do this, it all comes back to remembering that the student or the postdoc or whoever is just a person like you, and having it be a very professional conversation, but also one where there's empathy of the situation, helps a lot. If you have the conversation as people, then I think that can be really helpful. Put yourself in that person's shoes. There were a lot of times when I was a student that I had bad experiences, and also as a postdoc. And if you remember that when you have those conversations, and it helps you have something that's very professional and productive. So always go in with constructive paths forward. You don't ever want to have a meeting with someone where you say you're just not meeting that milestone, and that's the end of it. I mean, that's the worst thing. You need to have thought yourself about why that might be, have that conversation with the person, and then try to seek a path forward together as a group of people. Don't just leave it all to the student. So it's very much making them not feel like they're on their own in this situation, and also that there is an avenue forward. PhDs are hard. Very few people sail through without problems. And every student I have had has come into my office somewhere between the 1 year and the 2 year stage and said, I don't think I'm doing any good. I feel lost in the middle. I can't see the end, and they're in a slump. And it seems to be this common thing in the middle of a PhD. And I say the same thing to all of them, is that everybody, previous student before you, has come into my office and said the same thing, and they've all finished on time. And you just talk to them about what they are achieving and what that path forward looks like. Because in a 3-year PhD, it can be very difficult to have the perspective of where the thing you're stuck on at the moment it fits into the bigger scheme. So I just try to treat people like people and have it as a conversation. And it's about what can be done to move forward, not about focusing on the fact that things might not be progressing as fast as we would hope.
Okay. No, I think that's good. And this is, as you said, always going to be a very hard part of the job. So with that, I would like to transition to another really difficult topic is, talking about imposter syndrome. And I would like to start with you, Caro, if that's okay. Especially addressing it in, today's climate and in the pandemic. And we all, I'm sure a lot of us feel like we've been very unproductive in 2020, and like this might impact our careers negatively for the future. Do you have any advice on imposter syndrome in general, or any condolence, or just basically anything you can offer to us?
Yeah, certainly. I think imposter syndrome is something that everyone has. I haven't had a serious conversation about it with someone where they've said, oh no, I've never had that. I think everyone I've spoken to are kind of like, yeah, that's totally me. So we all have that. It's always with me, just like everyone else. In fact, when I found out I was going to answer this question, I felt I wasn't qualified to answer it. So there you have it. I personally have quite a feisty personality. So if someone tells me, you can't do that, or there's no way you'll get that, that's kind of motivation for me to try it. I know that not everybody is like that, but for me, that's often the case. But that doesn't mean that deep inside I feel like I can, but it certainly gives me the will to do it. Often with imposter syndrome, the things that I've found have worked, or the pieces of advice that I've heard that I've done and actually worked for me, is this like fake it till you make it. Like, I think oftentimes when you're put into a position where you don't feel qualified to do it, and that's this imposter syndrome, when you are absolutely qualified but you feel like, oh no, that's not me, I shouldn't be there. Just kind of put the persona on and then do it. That's always worked for me. I mean, if you don't try, you won't get it. If you don't give it a go, you'll never know that you were qualified to do it. I've done some pretty gutsy moves, I find, in my career, things that I thought, oh, there's no way we'll get this. I find that the Magpie Large Program, for example, was a massive step out into the unknown for myself. I can't speak for everyone in the group, but definitely for myself. I thought, wow, who am I to ask for that much time? That's ridiculous. And then when we got the time, I thought, oh, they made a mistake, or they don't know who we are. That's probably why. Kind of offensive to the other PIs. I'm sorry, but that was my imposter syndrome speaking. Like, I felt like, wow, what are they doing? But we're running this team. It's going really well. I'm so proud. I love everybody we're working with, the attitude, the work we've done, the progress so far, the science. So I think, you know, there you go. It was imposter syndrome. We're totally capable of doing this. Other things that help, I found, like I'll put sometimes some, you know, conquering kind of music or like really positive music before an interview, or like do the power pauses, you know, the whole like, I got this, you know, walk into the room, tell myself, you know, if it's a job interview, for example, well, that's my job. I just need to show them that it's mine. They don't know that yet. You know, that sort of like attitude, it's a bit, it might sound bad, but it really helps to kind of get in there and kind of crush the imposter syndrome, tell it, you know, go away. In terms of in this season and the productivity, you know, the usual things that people say, turn off the distractions, the pop-up reminders and all of that, that helps. But honestly, like what I found for me is that I've learned to actually accept procrastination as part of the creative process and to kind of use it to my advantage. So what I mean by that is that procrastination doesn't have to be scrolling through Facebook. Okay, that's rather unproductive and kind of useless for your career, for everything. But if you need to write that paragraph and you're staring at a blank page and there's kind of nothing coming, you can agonize over it for an hour. You can start scrolling on Facebook, nothing happens. Or you can go for a walk, and then when you come back, somehow the idea of how to start that paragraph has just dropped into your mind and it's there. So the walking was procrastination, but it was productive. You could decide to read a book that helps you, you know, expand on some of your knowledge, learn a little bit of a new way to code, like play with a new language or something like that. That's still useful in the long term, you'll find, and then it kind of changes your mind when you come back to it, you're refreshed, and then it's easier, you get less stuck. So that's how I find it really helps for me to kill procrastination. Okay, and in terms of this season, I've really struggled, like especially more than another. Like I really struggled to find a positive spin to this. For me, I've seen my job prospects dwindling. I don't know really where I'll be when my contract ends next year. And so that's kind of disconcerting. I don't want to kind of sugarcoat it or pretend that it's not there. I think this is, the attrition rate was always really high for academia. And I've always told myself, that's what I like to do. That's what I like to wake up in the morning for. So I'll do it as long as it works. So I reminded myself recently that that's still the case. I'll keep trying and I'll keep doing it for as long as it works. So we'll see. I mean, a good friend of mine earlier in the year told me to never, ever give up. And I think that was a good reminder. I mean, I'm not going to go down without a fight. That's what I'll say. I'm not sure if that's a consolation or a what do you say, condolence or whatever. I don't think I have any. But what I will say is that I think we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together, I guess. So I guess I'm in good company.
Would anyone else in the panel like to chime in on imposter syndrome or just talking about the job prospects right now in this pandemic?
I'll add something about imposter syndrome if I can. I agree with Caro that there are very few people who I have met who genuinely don't seem to have imposter syndrome. Although I have met some people who are like that and they don't really understand. But for the vast majority of people, it is definitely something. And I find for me, it waxes and wanes depending on whether I feel like I'm not getting any science done or I'm stuck on something that I think should be really simple. And I felt like a few years ago, I would have been able to do it easily. And so what I try and do is I go back to the things that I know that I'm good at. And one thing that I have developed over the 15 years since my PhD is really learning about myself and learning what I am good at and what I am not good at, and trying to focus on doing the things that I'm good at. And I know I can get some easy wins and a bit of confidence, and that can really help on the days when you really feel like, why the hell am I here? Why did I get a continuing position? At some point they're going to know, and this is all going to fall apart, and it's all just been held together by, you know, little sticks that will slowly burn. So finding the things that you're really good at and doing those things can give you that little bit of a confidence that you need to get back on track, I find.
So I can chip in on this. So I remember hearing from my boss, my current line manager, head of department, somebody that I have massive respect for. And we were talking about imposter syndrome, and he's like, yeah, but everyone gets that. And he kind of dismissed it as this universal thing. And I really found that did not help me. It wasn't really helpful for me to think, yeah, but you know, it still gets to me, like if I'm supposed to be here or getting this kind of opportunity or not. So I think it's good to know that everyone gets it. I think it's also good to have some tools, like Kath was saying, like, you know, a 3-step process you go through when you're hitting a situation where your imposter syndrome could really hold you back. And in like really, you know, costly ways, like a job interview or promotion, or, you know, giving a talk at a conference. These are important opportunities, and it's so easy to undermine yourself for basically self-made reasons. So I think it's good to have a kind of a toolkit to pull out when you're hitting those moments. And I think that reminding yourself what you're good at is a really important one, and we sort of undervalue that. I think it's one of the nice things about our community is that we're not all saying how great we are all the time, but there are moments when you need that, and it's actually true, you know, so you actually have to remind yourself of these things. So I think when I first cottoned onto this, when I was sort of thinking about the longer term picture of the career and where it was going and how to get there, and I started keeping a journal of work achievements. It actually came up in the context of a self-help book I read. I don't read a lot of self-help books, but this one actually turned out to be kind of useful. And it was just, you know, keep a note of the things, your little wins, and they're not all going to matter at the end. And you can throw it away if you have to, but just taking a note of things. I mean, first of all, it keeps it a bit more in your mind. You can turn to this at any stage. It can be, you know, asking for a raise, writing the job application, whatever it is, but you've got a record of the things that you've done, because I'll bet for most of us, you know, every week you made some progress on something. They can be small things, it can be tangential things, and they're so easily overlooked in that moment when you're walking into the room for the interview or trying to figure out how you're going to ask for this job. It's very easy to overlook things. So keeping a list, you can pick and choose when the time comes, but at least you've got that record. And I found that quite a useful thing, and it also saves you time at the end, because you will have to write that next job application. You will have to talk to people about your achievements, and it's just a useful way that you don't miss things in the spur of the moment when your imposter syndrome is gnawing away at the back of your head.
Okay, so I just want to add 2 sort of logistical things. First, always update your CV constantly. Like, don't wait until next week, because you will never remember what you did a week. Like, I don't even remember what I did last week. So and then the thing is, like, I actually have a master CV. It's really ridiculously detailed, and I keep track of everything: press releases, papers, students I've supervised, all the details. And then what you can do is, as you consider jobs, or you know, if it's primarily teaching or focus or research focus, or you know, maybe more management focus, you can tailor your CV and pull information from that, and then provide that to really make your application as strong as possible. So that's just sort of a logistical bit of advice. I tell this to everybody, and I can't stress how important this is, because you will not remember what you did a month ago that was related to education or outreach. I mean, you'll have your papers presumably, but that is such a small snapshot of what we do on a regular basis, right? It's just this one sliver of information. So I would just say, in terms of, you know, career advice, regardless, because then with a full CV, you can move into any direction that you need, right? You can tailor that information as needed for applying for the job. The other bit regarding, you know, how to kind of move the perspectives moving forward, and just more broadly, is don't sandbox yourself, right? So I've now, like, I think there's actually a number of stuff. Actually, I know because I do this for my job, for my EDI stuff. But people, especially people in underrepresented groups, tend to sandbox themselves in terms of looking at job applications. And they're like, oh, well, they're not looking for somebody like me. They're looking for X, Y, Z. And I only do like whatever, like A, B, C, C, I don't know, but some combination of that, right? So I think a lot of the times consider whether or not you would have a good experience just for applying for that position. And that's the way I look at it. Even if you think, oh, I'm just a really long shot, it's no way, but at least you kind of get your name out there with and you get practice also applying for positions. And not, and I would actually just stress, I know this is an academic focused discussion, but along those lines, I also think it's really important to also not sandbox yourself if you want to maybe develop more coding skills, or we were talking, or more management skills, or more just general things that you would find useful and that you find, or visualization skills, to look at those opportunities such that you can employ them moving forward, whether you stay in academia or you decide to take that and do amazing things in some other sector, right? Because those are all skills, if they're important to you and you like them and you want to enjoy learning them, you're going to incorporate them in your professional career. It gets to be bespoke to you. And so just, along those lines, I said, don't, in terms of applying for jobs or considering jobs, don't think that, well, 80% of it sounds great, 20% doesn't, so I'm not even going to bother because it's not a good match. Because you can always negotiate if you get to that point. But then primarily it's always good practice, right? You never want to be in a situation where you're, the job that you really, really want, you have no practice giving an interview, even over a virtual interview, you don't have any practice, with developing, a teaching plan or something like that. It's always just really good experience to accrue. So that's more of a, logistical thing.
Just about the COVID, this sort of specific aspects of the COVID situation for now. I think imposter syndrome is a massive topic, and it's very personalized as well. Everyone has kind of their own flavor. I was looking into it this morning. There's a ton of really good TED Talks from a variety of people that you might connect with and relate to, and they've all got good suggestions about how to harness your imposter syndrome for to be a motivator and turn it into something positive. About the COVID, I think it is a particularly difficult time, and it's very particular. It's global, right? So everyone's kind of in the same boat. Everyone's kind of been hit at some level in terms of productivity and so on. But in some way, the same rules apply. How are you making use of your time, and what is the story that you're going to have to tell when you come out of it? There's unfortunately there will be biases. I think the playing field will be even less level in some respects, but it's not all going to be bad. Everyone's going to have suffered at some level from this. That idea of like tracking what your achievements are, how are you coping with this? What have you done proactively? Keep an account of what the impact has been for you, so that you have a clear story at the end to articulate, so that it's not just COVID happened, it was all bad, I'm screwed. There's going to be more nuance to it than that, and you want your story to, you're going to tease some positives out of this, whatever they might be. It might just be how you've managed to balance the work-life commitments, being able to articulate clearly what the impact was, but what you did in the face of that adversity. So maybe it's more important now than ever to sort of keep some kind of objective view about the professional impacts of this on you particularly, so that you can articulate it when the time comes to apply for that job or get that interview opportunity.
Okay, so I'm going to take this now, and we take our achievements and flip it, and I'm going to present this to the whole panel, and whoever wants to talk about it can talk about it. But can you talk about something you've struggled with, and or a failure that you have had, because I'm sure there have been many, and how you overcame it?
Man, how long do we have?
I will give you 3 minutes.
I'll add a couple of things, if you like. So when I was in Boston and working in medical imaging physics, I was about 7 months pregnant, and my partner is in astronomy, so I still have very close links to the astronomy field. And I asked a very senior astronomer whether I would ever work in astronomy again, because I'd always wanted to be an astronomer from when I was 7 or 8 years old. And I'd always had this dream that that's what I wanted to be. And in my mind at the time, I was a failure if I was not an astronomer, which I've now moved on from. But at that time, as a 26 or 27-year-old. And this astronomer said, no, you'll never work in astronomy again. You've left the field and that's the end of it. And this is someone I have a lot of respect for. And I was really crushed by that. But over time, I realized that I did have actually something to contribute. And it was that contribution and that project that I put together in my mind and then wrote down and had discussions with people here at Curtin that it eventually got me that level A position to try something new, because that person who hired me didn't have that opinion that that you leave astronomy and get outside skills, that you can actually come back and you can add more and bring more. But it took me a while, and I think that was also compounded by the exhaustion of then having a young child and being stuck at home with a baby, which I found really, really boring. So that was one. I had a bad postdoc experience when I was in the US, where one of my postdoc supervisors and I just did not get on, and it went very badly in the end. And she told me that I didn't know anything and I was hopeless, and I was arrogant, and that I really struggled with that. And looking back on it now, I can see some things that professionally I could have done better. I didn't have the professional maturity that I do now to manage my time and manage myself, and I would have approached that situation very differently and not got myself into that situation. But yet I was young and inexperienced, and then it was really talking to people who did believe in me and trying to rebuild my confidence. But I almost chucked it all in at that point. I thought I was pretty hopeless.
I can go unless somebody else wants to. So I think most of you guys know that I'm actually super invested in trying to mentor younger people, with students, and I work with lots of students, as I think most of us who, once we progress, we work with students, undergraduates and PhD students and master's students, and at some point we also mentor postdocs. But the first PhD student I had never finished. Shocker! And she was great. She was, there was a full-on interview process. This is when I was on the faculty at the University of Zurich, and she's super smart, and she came in with everything that you would want in terms of a student, really keen, very, generous with her time, but then something happened. I'm not really sure. I tried talking with her quite extensively, tried to identify if there were other, obviously still respectful of her personal life. Yeah, we submitted, she wrote 2 lead author papers. We submitted to journals. Referee reports came back. They were actually pretty reasonable and weren't even that bad. But at that point, she just didn't want to continue. And during one of the conversations we had, she said she really wanted to do something that was more connected to people's lives. And I couldn't really argue against that, because astronomy, at least, it is very abstract. And I tried to, I was like, look, all you have to do is deal with these referee reports, and then we can just get your thesis together, and you'll at least finish with a PhD in astrophysics from the University of Zurich. That allows you to do a lot of other things, move on wherever you want. You've already invested the time, you might as well finish. But yeah, couldn't. She was just like, no. and I never, and I still, I mean, I tried to understand why. I mean, I tried to be as supportive as possible. I then, she started, I had her work more closely with her co-supervisor. I thought maybe it was just, you know, maybe I wasn't the right fit in terms of trying to motivate her. But the co-supervisor basically didn't get much traction either. And that person is also quite, you know, wasn't like the person Cathryn, wasn't this experience Cathryn was telling about, you know, still very supportive, was available. So yeah, and that weighs on me because I always wonder if there was something else I could have done or said or provided as an opportunity. And I mean, I don't think I could. I mean, I don't think there was anything I could have done. I mean, in the end, once people come into university, you're all adults, right? So if you decide this isn't what you want to do, then that's absolutely fine. I have to respect that. But yeah, so for me, it was a failure, not because you know, it's not an ego thing, or maybe it is. But I mean, I wasn't sure if there was something else I could have done or said or helped. But I mean, she seems happy. So I guess that's, I mean, that's in the end, that's all we want is for our people to be happy. But it was, yeah. But you don't know about that, right? You probably know all the people who I have worked with, because in the end, the good news is that for the most part, we're remembered for the things that we do well, as Cathryn was pointing out. But we also hopefully learn from all of our experiences such that we can, you know, continue to focus on trying to be better at all the various aspects of our job.
This segues really nicely into a anonymous question I received, you know, that talks a little bit about, you know, survivor bias, and when young folk come to you and they ask you for, you know, general career advice, you know, do you feel like there is a universal advice you can give at all to people when they, you know, when we want to, you know, reach these, you know, these high achieving, you know, ideal jobs of, you know, permanent faculty researcher? And does survivor bias play into any of this at all?
I'm just gonna, so I think, I don't know if I'm gonna answer this question, but I think honestly, the most important thing I can recommend to people is to just allow themselves to reflect on a regular basis as to whether or not this is the path that they really want to be on. Because your priorities change, your responsibilities change, and feeling like you have to stay in this track because you, quote, made it, is not a reason to stay in the track. Not at all. I mean, everyone here is really smart, super capable, highly motivated, have a lot of, you know, presumably a reasonably good support network. You're going to do important, impactful things regardless of what track you decide to choose to go in. And just because, and the other thing is that staying in academia is, I've also noticed, a very random process. There are certain skills, but there could be a hiring freeze. Doesn't matter how amazing you are, there are no jobs. That has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I think casting it as survivor, I mean, that means the alternative people who don't survive are, I'm not sure how we count them. I think it's that awareness, a real awareness of how many options you have and what options you have as a, let's say as a PhD or early career researcher, the skill set that you have. We often haven't, I think in our training, we haven't built in the opportunities for you to know, how do I compare out there in the real world? How are these skills that I have that everybody around me seems to have? So I think it's just like par for the course. How standout are they in the real world? We don't get many opportunities to see that. Some of us, you know, may have those opportunities or have friends that, you know, can give us that contrast. But when we're in, you know, surrounded by super talented people, it's easy to lose sight of your value. I think we have, you know, enormous value, enormous potential. But what we miss is maybe the realization of this and the opportunities to sort of experience that, so that we can get that into perspective. And probably in our field, it's not easy to go between them. So it feels like this big decision. And like Kath was saying, you know, once you're out, you're out. And that's kind of a pervasive attitude, unfortunately, because I think there's real value to spend time outside of academia and then realize, you know, if you want to come back or not. Having that door open in both directions, I think, is something that we could do a better job of. But I don't like this idea of survivor bias. Like, I don't see myself as a survivor. I've been lucky and had opportunities and it's worked out for me, but it's not that the alternative would have been a disaster. Who knows what it would have been.
Yeah, if I can add to that, on Richard's point about it being a pervasive attitude that you can't come back to astronomy. I have found in the last 15 years since I had that conversation with that person that attitudes in general have actually moved on a lot. And I think it's far more common now to come across people who see that the experiences that you get from outside astronomy are actually highly beneficial for astronomy. And so I think it's much easier to do that now than it used to be. But it's interesting, I had a conversation with Stephen Tinga a couple of weeks ago because we were talking about the fact that Curtin's about to advertise a continuing position for all you people looking for a job. We're about to advertise a continuing position. And the fact that everyone who had continuing positions at Curtin, himself included, and me, got those all through different ways. And there's always an element of luck in there, that randomness that Richard and V were talking about. There's always that randomness available, and you know, that those opportunities. And if you listen to the backgrounds as we all described ourselves at the start, none of us have had a linear background. I went through 3 postdocs. You know, V's had tenure track positions at various different places. I came in and out of academia and in and out of astronomy. And that it's not unusual for the path to take you places that you never thought your path would take you. But also there's a question from Bi Ching in the chat that I think also sort of speaks to this. And she asks about, you know, aggression and being a self-promoter, and what about people who are not like that? I think my experience has always been that to be who you are, you don't have to be an aggressive self-promoting person to get a continuing position. If you just look around at the people who are in astronomy jobs, it's certainly the case that a lot of people are not like that. But the one thing those people I think have really done is just be yourself. Speak about the things you generally know you are good at. And if there's something that you're not really good at, trying to promote yourself and saying that you are really good at that sometimes can fall down. So being yourself has got me a long way, and I think that that's true of a lot of people.
I might add on to that, because I don't know if my comments from before were that question reflected that. I don't mean to go in and pretend like this fake it till you make it is like you are qualified for something. You are. It's just you don't feel it, right? It's imposter syndrome. And so it's going in kind of, I don't feel so confident, but be like, I am confident. And then kind of going in like that with the power pause and, you know, like that sort of stance. I don't mean to like pretend that you know something that you don't and then BS your way through. That never ever flies. I don't think that's a good strategy.
About self-promotion, yeah, I kind of struggled with this when I came back into the academic. So working at an observatory, it's very different environment from academia. It's a bit more corporate, and everyone's kind of on the same team. You know, you have one goal is to get the telescope ready for that night so that it's all going smoothly, deliver great data, and that's everyone's core mission around you. And I still struggle coming into the academic world where it's much more individualistic. And it is definitely important to be yourself, but and there's that fine line between self-promotion, like, oh yeah, I'm the best, versus just stating the facts. What are your actual achievements? What have you actually done? And those are two different things, right? And I guess it comes back to that kind of identifying your value. It's there, and you need to get comfortable talking about what it is in genuine terms. And that's, I think that's the gray area between, you know, underselling yourself and self-promotion, aggressive self-promotion. There's a big gray area where I think most people kind of sit. And I found that in the academic part, you know, like you're applying for promotion, you have to put this forward yourself. If you wait for somebody else to do it, you're going to be waiting a long time. And that's not very natural, I think. I find it very hard to do that. It's a bit like applying for an award yourself about how great you are. It's not, what kind of external validation is it if I spent, you know, 3 weeks writing about how great I am to get some award? But at some level, you have to become comfortable with it and remind yourself that, you know, this is fact-based. You know, we're scientists, we like evidence. You probably have evidence of your achievements. And so you're not making it up. That's not self-promotion. That's just stating fact and putting that forward. And you've got to be comfortable with this. And I think the more you're aware of it, the more comfortable you are with it in perspective, I think that the easier, you know, a lot of things become easier because there's just this aspect of making it clear to people what is your value.
So I just wanted to follow up on Richard's point about that, and I think Carol had mentioned it earlier, is that be your own advocate. And I think along those lines, like be your own best friend. Like if, you know, you may not feel comfortable saying, oh, you know, Richard, I'm like the most amazing person ever. But imagine if it's, oh, Richard, my best friend, who I know has done all this awesome stuff and has made such a positive impact in this program. What would I write about him? And if you kind of think of it that way, then it becomes hopefully a little bit more, it doesn't feel so weird. Because in the end, you know, you do have to be your own best friend. You have to be your own advocate, an advocate along those lines. And the sort of on a, now kind of taking it a bit differently, which is that in terms of having to develop skills. Okay, so I think Richard mentioned it, and Cathryn and Kara, you know, there are all these things that I never knew in grad school. Like if I never knew in grad school, like, this is what I'd have to do. I'd reconsider a little bit. I mean, as I said, I'd like to think I would enjoy, you know, I'm very happy with where I am. I have the luxury of pretty much working with just amazing people and having fun projects and all that. But there's other stuff, right? No one ever tells you, I hate budgets. Kath, can I send you my budgets? Because apparently you don't, like if the worst thing is having hard conversations, I will send you my budgets. I will have your hard conversations for you. You know, and dealing with committee, which, you know, is really important, but then picking the ones that really matter, but then not being able to say no to certain things because you know that if you do, it'll kind of haunt you, but also being savvy enough to know when that line should or should not be crossed. People basically coming to you for all sorts of random things, which is fine, but the problem is that then your job isn't full-time anymore. It's like 1.5 full-times if you're lucky, right? And so it's that work-life balance, which I'm sure you guys have had lots of conversations about. But I guess my point is that if there are certain skills that, you know, you may not be very comfortable with them, but you do need to develop them, and that's part of the process. You don't obviously need to focus on everything as a graduate student, but as part of your training, as you go through postdoc, and then along the way, I mean, I'm not saying that you should go out and be like aggressive or not be true to your nature, but you are going to have to do things that push your boundaries in the same way that you push your scientific boundaries. You have to push your networking boundaries. You have to push your HR, no, not that type of boundary. You know, HR being like more just how to work with people, manage people, yeah. So there's a lot there, and that kind of goes back to what I was just saying earlier. Is like, just give yourself permission to really think about, you know, what this track means for you, and because I suspect also a lot of the job positions, depending on where they are, even though it's faculty, they will have different responsibilities. There'll be a different load. There'll be different expectations when you're coming in, and it may be great, which is great. Rarely is that the case. So just just be aware. It's, you know, this academic track, it's good, but I'm just saying, you guys got lots of options. So just make sure that this is really where you want to go, and take into account all of those other, as I said, priorities and responsibilities that change with time, because that's totally normal and that's the way life's supposed to be. So, you know, just, it's not, you know, it's not a weakness to think, okay, well, what do I really want? Because then if you do continue in this direction, you go into it with intention and not sort of by default.
Thank you. No, that was a lot of conversation. That was very good. Let's see. We have another anonymous question, and it is, and this is being addressed to the whole panel, so whoever wants to answer can just jump right in. How important is having a good PhD supervisor? You know, with respect to having, if you have a crappy PhD supervisor and you have to recover along the way. Do you feel like you can ever fully recover, or does having that good PhD supervisor from the beginning really set your path down if you can have a successful career or not?
I might answer, well, give a perspective on that. I've seen things go both ways. I've certainly seen some great PhD advisors really like spearheading and helping their students. Like, they're great mentors, they put their students forward, they help them with their strengths and level up. And then similarly, I've seen PhD supervisors who basically give you a desk and then walk away and come back 3 years later with the thesis. And I've seen people succeed in both instances, where I think, I certainly think it's harder in the latter, and I think it can be even worse than the latter. I think you can have an instance where someone is actively negatively impacting, so the feedback is crushing and all of that, and I've seen that happen as well. So I think it's really important, if you're, I don't know who's asking, but if you're in the process of choosing a PhD supervisor, it's worth asking the students that they have already, like privately, to find out those big alarm bells. If it's, you know, there's been instances of bullying in the media and stuff like that, I think it's really worth, I think that can really crush a career, I would say. But there's a wide range of styles of supervising, which are fine, but I think will depend on the style that you like to be supervised. For some people, yeah, give me a desk and come back in 3 years, I'm happy. Like, you know, maybe that's who you want. That's who, you know, others, no, actually, I want, you know, I catch up over a cup of tea every day so that I can get, you know, constant guidance and so forth. And that's the kind of supervisory style that you're after. So asking the students for what their style is and then seeing how that sits with you is probably a really good thing, both for you, I think, and for the supervisor as well, because I haven't had as much supervision experience perhaps as some of the other members of the panel, but what I've seen with the students that I've supervised is that there's a wide range of the way that they like to be supervised, and to kind of establish that and trying to be flexible for that. But I mean, I'm one person, and so I think it's worth, as a student or a prospective student, to really think about how you like to be supervised, and then seeing if that sits right with the supervisor you're considering.
So then I suppose this segues nicely to a question that was asked earlier in the chat is, are there red flags that you've learned to identify that you can use to help you keep from, you know, joining or working in a bad situation, or joining, you know, with a PhD supervisor who might not necessarily be the most supportive person to work with?
I think that what Cara was just saying, and I completely agree with absolutely everything she just said. If you're considering working with someone, whether it's a supervisor or a line manager, always contact people who currently are in that same position with that person and find out what it's like day to day. Just get that feeling of whether this is someone that you will be able to work effectively with, because it does make all the difference to your own experience whether you can work effectively with that person. And then in terms of red flags, I think if you meet someone and they talk about the project or they talk about what the work is, but don't consult with you on what you're interested in doing or what your skills are or how that fit, then that to me would be a bit of a small red flag that it's actually a conversation, and how a project evolves depends as much on the student as it does on the supervisor and the project itself. So you want to have someone who shows some level of wanting to know what your interests are and what your skills are and how that can be melded together to get something that is good for everybody.
Okay, I have another anonymous question for the whole panel. So everyone on our panel has moved multiple times, both domestically and or internationally multiple times. And some challenges that we often hear from people is that they feel lonely either in their new workplace or city or country, that the two-body problem can be a really big problem, or they feel like they can't settle down due to, having to move every few years, quite possibly to a new country for a postdoc. And so how is this experience for all of you, both professionally and personally?
Well, I can start. So I think I've been incredibly lucky that my family's moved with me. All the big moves we made, I got married in my PhD and we moved as a family to Leiden and had a kid there, and then moved all together to Hawaii and now to Australia. And we didn't have the two-body problem in terms of like trying to find two academic positions at the same place. But obviously we had to figure out what moves made sense for us as a family. That was always the priority. Just like if it hadn't worked out here, I think we'd probably stay in Sydney, even if I had to leave an academic job, because we like it here and it's stable and there are good opportunities for both of us. So I think we always made those moves as a family unit decision. And then, in that spirit, it was just this fantastic adventure, that we took and embarked on, perhaps naively, but that's probably the best way to do it, and kind of made it work out. So I think for me, I saw the travel, and for us as a family, the travel has been kind of overall net positive, although it's definitely had its challenges. But yeah, my job was leading things, and for my wife, it was about her having opportunities, and we were lucky to make that work.
Yeah, I can add to that. I moved countries twice. Both times were for my husband's job. And the first few months of moving were always really difficult. The second time in particular, because I had a 13-week-old baby, and it would get to the point where I would be standing at the top of the driveway at 5 p.m. waiting for him to come home so I could hand over the baby because I was toast. And that was really difficult. But ultimately you do start to, if you getting yourself out, walking around, just seeing the sights, taking things in, I found made a big difference in both of the moves that I did, and they ultimately have both been great adventures. But personally, it has been a struggle. In both times, I moved and I wasn't working, so just trying to find my feet. I think professionally, the start of a new position is always a bit weird for a few weeks because you're just trying to work out how you fit in. But that will also come, and it is again really part of the adventure. And so I think moving around countries and being impermanent is really difficult. It's really hard on your life, and it can be professionally and personally quite a challenge for that to have to happen. But ultimately, it's usually quite an enriching experience, and I wouldn't change what happened for me at all, because it sort of makes you who you are.
I chime in as well. I moved from obviously English isn't my first language, but I did speak English before coming to Australia. Moved here, there were some slangs and things that I didn't even like understand, so I struggled a little bit just with the language aspect. And then got married, and then we moved, my husband and I, to Chile. And then there I realized that we couldn't get by with English. We had to learn Spanish. So that was an extra layer on top to even after a couple of years there, I would say most of our friends were internationals like us. So it was kind of hard to make we did make some local friends, but it was just a little bit harder with the language barrier. So it was extremely isolating experience for both my husband and I. I look back now, and then I look really fondly on most of our memories and almost everything that we lived there. It's funny how your brain kind of clears out some of the clug and, you know, the loneliness that we felt when we were there, but that's definitely there. Then we decided to move back to Australia. And I think at this point, it's very unlikely that we'll have another international move. I think we're both very settled here for probably the same reason that Richard was saying. Like, make your network of friends. You've got people you can really trust and rely on, and that is really priceless, I find. Having to start that from scratch again, and, you know, not knowing anyone and not having simple things like even finding like a local dentist and a local GP that you trust and things like that. These are all little things that even if you don't move overseas, even if there's no language barrier, you know, you don't know your neighbors, you don't know if you can drop, you know, if you have children, if there's anyone that can look after them, if there's an emergency of some sort. Like, starting from scratch is really, really hard. So yeah, I found that difficult. I personally, I mean, I don't know where the question was coming from really, but personally, it annoys me that that's kind of almost an assumption that people will move far and wide for a career in academia, in astronomy. I understand that it's good that there's cross-pollination between the groups, but what really do we gain by forcing people to move every couple of years that we wouldn't gain from an international collaboration and a couple visits? I don't know the answer to that. I'm just putting it out there because I found it difficult myself to have to move.
Okay, let's see. We have a couple more questions. How do you transition from being a postdoc to being seen as a potential faculty member?
So I'm just, I think this is, actually there was a Nature article on this a couple weeks ago about what it is that sort of is a hallmark of this transition, and I think the conclusion was that it was a bunch of intangibles and it changed depending on the situation and the job. I mean, these are jobs in STEM, so not just physics and astro. So what phase are we talking about? Are we talking about the first phase of applying, or if you make it to a long list or short list? I mean, where are we on this?
I mean, I think we're trying to, you know, how do you transition to being viewed as, you know, an independent leader who can do their own research, and, you know, it is worth investing in this person as, you know, a permanent faculty researcher? How do you gain those skills?
Yeah, so those are, I guess, a couple of different things, but I'm not sure if there's a transition for you as a researcher about that. Like, I think it's a mindset. And I think you should start with that mindset from the beginning in a way. You can't action all of it. You don't have the track record and experience of it that would just, it's not like you're going to go into a faculty position straight out your PhD necessarily, but it's about the mindset. And I think if you approach your research as more than just doing this bit of research, but taking responsibility for that work. How do I push it to the next level? What are the opportunities for me to start leading things? And, you know, so I think you kind of have that broader outlook from day one. You just haven't necessarily built up the track record with it. And it can't necessarily be your focus from day one because you've got to get some papers behind you and under your belt. But I don't think that changes the mindset about, you know, the bigger picture and adding value to the research field, which will then be of value to a potential employer later on a permanent basis. You still have to compete for resources. That's a key part of being faculty. You have to bring in grants and telescope time and students, and you have to kind of argue why your ideas are worthwhile and compelling. That doesn't really change either. So I think the sooner you kind of get on board with those ideas, I think that starts kind of from day one. And then there'll be a point where you actually start getting the opportunities because your track record is such that, you know, it's becoming more of an expectation. But you don't just like wake up one day and say, okay, it's 3 years in, now I have to start applying for grants. I think you probably want to have that perspective from day one, or start nurturing what that is.
So I'm just going to add on to what Richard said. I think, you know, when you're applying for postdoc positions, everybody, and to be fair, we're only really talking about research faculty positions, right? Where there's a whole world of other faculty. I mean, we're just, because I think given the people who are on your panel, this is what we're going to speak to. And so this should not be considered the end-all response, because there's a number of other faculty academic focused positions that are not necessarily research focused that are going to be also very fulfilling and important and an opportunity. So let's just, if we're just focusing at least on research though, I would say that when you're writing your applications for postdocs, where everybody knows now, you basically put a research statement together of stuff that you've done and a research statement of what you want to do. And that what you want to do part is usually a plan that has to be achievable within a 2 to 3 year time frame that is deliverable within the envelope of that funding position, right? So for me, the mark of when at least somebody is transitioning into becoming a faculty member is that that research plan cannot be completed by them alone. That research plan is big, it's ambitious, it's something that not only one person who was working really, really hard can do, but somebody who says, okay, well, I want to make this study happen. To make this study happen, I have to get, you know, parts 1, 2, and 3 together. To make those parts operate, I need to collaborate with this person, this person, this person. I need to hire this student. And so at the end of a 5-year time scale, I will have achieved and delivered this amazing discovery, research, whatever. And whether or not it actually happens, it never happens, right? So a lot of what we do is, it's very aspirational. It's about whether what you do is relevant, it's ambitious, it's exciting, and has impact. I hate that word, has impact. But in the end, it has to be stuff that you really care about, because it's going to be something you're going to be working on for a really long time. So if you're just choosing stuff that you think is going to have impact or sells well, your heart's not going to be into it. You're not going to really get that much out of it, and it's going to show. But I would just say that for me, that transition is, okay, it's not like I'm going to be working on this project for 3 years, and I'm going to have this amazing, you know, paper or 2 papers at the end of it. It's, I want to make this really, I have this plan, it needs to be done, it needs to be done now, this is how I'm going to do it. And in the end, you guys are going to be so excited when it's going to be done that you can't help but not want me to be at your institute when I, you know, am realizing this big project.
No, I think I thought that was really great about the transition, you know, requiring a research vision that has to involve other people beyond yourself. And that was really good. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. So I think we have about answered all the questions, and I would like to end with a happy note. And I would like each of you to discuss what you love most about your job. As we all have to think to go and find something.
Oh, no, I have a lot. I have a lot. I think that's what I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll try to keep it under a minute. So obviously, I mean, I went into this because I liked thinking. I looked at this universe and thought it was really just awesome, right? Like just to think about stuff. It's very, very abstract, not particularly special. But you know, like in the end, you get into it because you like science and you really enjoy thinking about problems. But over the years, it's really evolved into, honestly, the biggest impact I have is not my research. Not at all. I mean, I'd like to think it does, but in the end, yes, it's important to write papers. But honestly, because I am at a teaching university, the biggest impact I have are the students that I teach and the people that I mentor. That is honestly the longest social, longest societal impact I will have. And that is, and that to me is a real honor, because maybe will help somebody find their, passion in physics or astronomy or engineering or something, and then they end up, being part of a big project that helps solve climate change. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but I mean, look, in the end, that's honestly the biggest impact I have. I mean, yes, the science impact, because it hopefully inspires people to study science and to come to university and really, drive deep into this. But that and be that, it's a very long process, and to see that it is a worthwhile endeavor. But yeah, so for me, that's what it's become, is really just working with people and hanging out with you guys. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, working with awesome people and seeing other people do really great science that excites them is the best part of the job. And if I can be involved in helping someone else achieve their science, that's so rewarding. I mean, it's amazingly rewarding. And so I really enjoy being in a place where people are doing interesting things. In general, I think people in astronomy are really interesting people. They have interesting backgrounds. They're really friendly, so it makes for a really nice workplace. So that's definitely one of the best parts of the job. And also for me is that ultimately it's actually quite a flexible job. I like going walking early in the morning, and that's where I do a lot of my thinking about the science problem that I'm trying to work on. And I like being able to do that and then come into work and work on that, and maybe go outside and have a think again. And every day is different. And I really enjoy the fact that week to week, my weeks look very different, and it's not just the same thing over and over. And there's actually quite a lot of flexibility for us to be able to do great science. So I really like that.
Well, I have to pinch myself on a fairly regular basis that I get paid to do this. Basically, it's just an enormous privilege, I think. And, I get excited. I think I loved telescopes, just the idea of like being away from everyone on a mountaintop, working with the telescope to do astronomy just seemed like a lot of fun to me. But it brings you in touch with a lot of technology and a vast array of people, and a lot of cutting edge stuff. And it just amazes me that it's all geared towards figuring out something new about the universe on a sort of nightly basis or daily basis. And I think that's just very rewarding on a personal level, that we actually get paid to do this kind of stuff. And sharing is definitely, massively enjoyable. Also with the public, I'm sure a bunch of people here are doing outreach, and just being a conduit between the personal fascination that I get and like inspiring a next scientist who, as you say, is going to cure cancer or do something important, even if it's not astronomy. I get a real buzz out of that.
I was going to kind of say almost the same thing as has already been said. I think for me, it's morphed over the years. It's kind of started, and I still think, like, when I take a step back, I'm like, wow, my job is so cool. Like, there's lots of cool things I've done in my life, but like, I think being an astronomer is really cool. So I really enjoy what I do, but also nowadays it's really, I'm choosing my colleagues now. I'm on a fellowship. I choose who I work with, and I really love the people I work with. I really enjoy, just working with them. I think we let's say, maybe it's an echo chamber. Sometimes I wonder, like, oh, of course, you know, we're all sort of a similar type. We're trying to understand things. We all think in similar ways. We all have that sort of scientific, we're a bit critical, and then, you know, we question everything. But I really enjoy those stimulating conversations. And yeah, I think for me, that's really the highlight, is the people I work with and then the job itself.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour. Now I want to thank everyone for attending, and as well as the panel for attending and giving us your amazing thoughts on all these really hard questions that we asked. So we're about just over halfway done now with this series, with our virtual series on, you know, maintaining your career during this pandemic. Next week we have one on jobs in data science. So yeah, today was focused very heavily on research academic careers, and so we have now a couple of sessions on other types of jobs from other people who have been very successful in what they do. So thank you everyone, and have a good rest of your week.